EA Games.
Challenge everything.
EA Games.
Challenge everything.
In this video, I'm going to be showing you how to upscale and enhance your PSP games using the PPSSPP emulator. With these in-depth graphics guides, it looks like why your PPS. We're also going to be covering the infamous bloom problem and how to emulator up, go into settings, and make sure that you're on the graphics tab in the top left hand corner. Now normally I'll go through these settings sequentially top to bottom. But for this video, we are going to be jumping around a little bit so we can keep all the video settings in one section. So starting with the graphics backends, if you have Vulkan available, you should definitely be using it. It generally performs the best and you can use multi-sample anti-aliasing with it, which unfortunately you can't do with the rest. There's also 3 texture shaders that are exclusive to Vulkan, one of which is actually really good. If your hardware doesn't support this, you should definitely be using Direct3D 11 instead. It has good compatibility and it performs better than OpenGL. Direct3D 9 is really only here for older machines and older versions of Windows, so unless you have either of those, you can pretty much ignore this one. And OpenGL is what Android users are going to be using if they don't have Vulkan available, because Direct3D is only for Windows. For this video, I'm going to be switching over to Vulkan. Rendering resolution of course increases your internal resolution. The higher you set this, the better the graphics are going to look. And also the amount of jaggies is also reduced without the need for anti-aliasing. Now you should probably be setting this to the resolution of your screen. If you set it higher and it's having to downsample, you can get some weird artifacting and some other strange stuff going on. Android users will be restricted to 5x, and because you're on a smaller screen, you've definitely got a lot more flexibility with what you set. You can pretty much set it to your personal preference, unless you're restricted by your performance, which is definitely going to be a factor when on Android. Now this multi-sample anti-aliasing option will only appear here if you've got the Vulkan backend set, and we've got up to 8x available. As you can see, it does a really good job at removing the jaggies. It does, of course, eat performance, but I recommend setting this as high as you can for the best possible. possible image. However, if you're an Android user and you're playing these games on a smaller screen, you may want to avoid this entirely. It will absolutely kill your performance, and you're probably not going to notice those jaggies on a smaller screen. Full screen is pretty obvious. Activate it to start in full screen mode. Now VSync, normally I would advise turning on by default and only turning it off as and when you need to. But with this emulator, it is recommended to leave it off by default and only turn it on if you're actually encountering screen tearing. Most games don't actually suffer from that, and if you turn this on by default, you're just increasing your latency. Inversely, Android users need to leave this on by default, so you don't encounter any frame rate or pacing issues. We're going to come back to display layout and effects a little bit later on, but for the moment we're going to scroll all the way down to texture filtering. So anisotropic filtering sharpens textures when they're being viewed at extreme viewing angles, and this is set to times 16 out of the box. It's not that performance heavy, and it's definitely the best setting to use. Moving down to texture filtering, and we're now wading into the more subjective visual stuff. So setting auto will follow the exact same filtering that the devs applied to the game, making it the most authentic and technically accurate. Setting nearest takes any linear smoothing effects that the devs applied to the game and turns it off, because nearest doesn't use any smoothing effects. This does present a sharper overall image, but you've got to remember, the devs applied those smoothing effects for a reason, so it doesn't look like a pixelated mess in 3D games. However, where setting nearest totally makes sense is if you want super sharp pixels in pure 2D games, but for 3D games, in my opinion, it just looks weird. Setting linear will apply that linear smoothing effect to every single texture in the game, including ones that didn't originally have it. I'm not too sure what the practical application for this one is, but it's there if you want to use it. And finally, we've got Auto Max Quality. This is doing the same thing that Auto is doing, so it is accurate and authentic, but it's also applying bitmaps to areas of the game that didn't originally have it. In layman's terms, this gets rid of the shimmering and flickering that you see in objects in the background. It uses those additional bitmaps to find the sweet spot with anisotropic filtering, which is why this is the best setting if your performance can handle it. Smart 2D texture filtering is very much still a work in progress and is pretty much brand new. It's really only intended to fix a handful of issues in a small amount of games, only to be activated for those games specifically. And I'll put a link for the progress report in this one in the description below. Moving on to texture scaling. And these options will further change how your textures will look from whatever you've just set in the previous section with texture filtering. Now, texture scaling is used to give the illusion of high detail on those low resolution PSP textures. And to say that opinions vary on this one is an understatement. Some people absolutely hate these, and some people think they're a prerequisite. And if you're like me, you'll use them on a game by game basis depending on how it looks. So just to preface this, everything in texture scaling is pure personal preference. It's just how you want things to look. So whether you use it or not is up to you. But of course, I'm still going to show you all 4 of the different looks that we can achieve. But before I do that, I need to mention the upscale level first. If you're using a 1080p display like most of us are, you should be using 4x. 5x is really meant for 4K monitors. And if you don't want to use texture scaling at all, make sure you select off with this option. Android users will be restricted to ×2 and ×3. ×2 for lower resolution devices, ×3 for higher resolution devices. Now, upscale type will change how your textures will look, and we've got 4 different algorithms that we can choose from. So to make this easier, I'm going to toggle through each one whilst I've got a game loaded up so you can see what they look like. So first up, we've got XBRZ. I'm not the biggest fan of this look, and if I'm being honest, I think it looks like a wet trampled painting, but it does have its fans, and for some games it may look flattering. Definitely one of those looks where you either love it or you hate it. Next up, we've got hybrid filtering, which is using a mix of linear filtering and XBRZ. It's applying linear filtering to all of the larger objects and XBRZ for all the finer detailed smaller objects. Next up is bicubic. This is my favourite one of the bunch because I think it looks the most natural, and that's if I'm using texture scaling in the first place. And lastly, we have hybrid plus bicubic. This is basically hybrid mode, but much smoother. However, it does make it the most blurry looking one of the lot. Now this texture shader option is only available for the Vulkan backend, and these will override whatever you're using for your normal texture scaling. As you can see, when we select one, we lose access to these options. Using one of these isn't as performance intensive, so if you're getting slowed down doing it the normal way, you may want to use these. And we have more XBRZ options. ×2 if you're using a lower resolution, and ×4 if you're using a higher resolution. MMPX gives an overall more pixelated look, but those pixel edges will set filtering, display layout and effects. Now that we're all done with textures, we can scroll all the way back up to the top to display layout and effects. Now that we're all done with textures, the better we quite like this one. Edges, MMPX gives an overall more pixelated ×4 if you're using a higher resolution. Set it for filtering, display layout and effects. aka shaders, and you want to mess around with these when you've actually got a game loaded up, so you can see what they actually look like and see your changes take place in real time. Once you've found a good spot in game, just first thing I need to mention here is the screen scaling filter. If you want a sharper image, hard pressed to actually see the difference, but there is a difference. Some of these are just for fun, some of these are a little bit more original resolutions that I can change a godsend. Now the nice because of the emulation, but because of the way the original hardware works. An anti-blur, the bloom problem that solution, the best way to cheese. Start effecting, even if you set it to aggressive. The third, and in my opinion, best way to remove the ghost artifacting is to either reduce or completely remove the bloom using cheats. By completely disabling the bloom, we are removing the root cause of the issue. But as you can see, it's not really what the devs intended. Those bloom effects actually added some quality to the image. Without it, it looks quite muted and the brightness isn't as much. But as you remember from earlier on, we have our color correction shader to bring all of this back up. So what I do is hit escape, go to display layout and effects on the right hand side, and then add a shader. Obviously I'm going to add the color correction one, and the only thing I really change here is the gamma. This acts more as dynamic range than it does, especially for enhancements, from optimizations, fixes, tweaks, FPS hacks to full-blown controller hacks. And this is now one of the first places I'll check when I'm playing a game just to see what I can do with it. If you want to use those cheats, it's easiest and best to add an entire database to the emulator, so you can have all the cheats for all the games. There are pop a link for this page, open it up. Then you want to bring up the emulator. You've got a cheats folder right here. Go into the mem on here and open it up. Then you want to bring up the emulator file system. Go into the memstick folder, then the PSP folder, and you can see we've got a cheats folder system. You want to unsee it. And I'll pop a link for this page
Hey everyone, in this video I'll be showing you
EA Games.